gentlemen, and welcome to my Action Research Project presentation. My focus question is, how can I change the dialogical discourse in the classroom to make lessons more engaging? Here is a submissions page where you can find my email address and the declaration. North Public School is a co-educational government school situated within the Western Suburb region of New South Wales. The school currently has an enrollment of 702 students, with 97% of these students coming from a non-English speaking background. At the core of the school's philosophy is their theme, the best of all worlds for 21st century learners. The theme reflects the school's learning focus, which aims to intrinsically motivate students through the employment of evidence-based, innovative, and differentiated practice to develop students' foundational skills in literacy and numeracy, as well as 21st century skills. Working with Sarah Harouk at this school during my first practicum experience was a pleasure. Sarah upholds the school values by actively engaging in differentiating lessons to improve achievement levels in her class. She also embeds the school's instructional model in her planning to incorporate creative instruction to engage students. Sarah's teaching approach is akin to Bruner's spiral curriculum, in that she often scaffolds instruction and builds her lessons around the development of prior knowledge. Sarah's Year 1 class consists of 22 students varying in broad learning abilities. The students that are falling behind in the class often seem disengaged and lack self-confidence during class activities. The achievement levels are equal across all curriculum areas, while the students achieving at or above their age group had mixed learning outcomes across the learning board. These students also finish tasks early to read with their friends or play on the iPad. I believe that a shift from explicit learning to a more dialogical learning space could improve learning outcomes in this class, as well as motivate interest to continue with tasks beyond the allotted session. I have chosen to focus my action research project on the implementation of socially constructed dialogue in the classroom, because I believe this will best serve 1H if I were to return to teach at this school. Boyer and Crippen 2014 state that 21st century education is about the affordance of gaining skills to become autonomous individuals. From my observation in 1H, I noticed that students were heavily reliant on their teachers to help them write simple recount narratives and solve mathematical problems. I think this is partially because of the teaching pedagogy and the lack of student control. The MEE framework for engagement looks at ways to increase engagement for better learning outcomes. According to Munns and colleagues, the message system in the classroom is one process that can be changed to increase student engagement. In giving students more control of their learning, teachers in effect are sending positive messages to their students. It imparts the idea that teachers believe in students' abilities and gives them a voice in the learning space, thus increasing self-efficacy. As a future educator, I need to be aware of what influences my teaching and ensure that I am providing rewarding learning experiences that create autonomous individuals. I propose that productive classroom dialogue can give students in 1H a rewarding experience, as it will enable them to develop skills to use talk as a thinking tool, or as Littleton and Mercer call it, the interthinking. Changing the rules in whole class discussion to an equal balance of teacher-student interaction can allow for these students to reason, inquire, and solve problems, which are essential skills for 21st century living. The following slides are the activities I plan for my mini unit of work. methodological design includes the collection of various data types to study my focus question. Collecting a variety of data types ensures that I am gathering quality knowledge about my teaching practice. To protect the privacy of students, I will be sending permission slips for parental consent to conduct this research. In the mini unit of work that I have planned for this project, I have set out some tasks that require students to collaborate and devise an imaginative story. Students will create a list which entails ideas to include in their story as well as a narrative. As this task is ongoing until the end of the term, I will not be able to collect the 5 lists and 5 narrative templates immediately after the lesson. However, I plan to gather data throughout my research to inform my practice and make changes where necessary. I will use photocopied work samples during the research and analyze the samples alongside observational data. I am planning on using different types of observational data to assist with my research. I will film my lessons to observe student interactions in whole class discussions as well as group activities. To avoid a biased perspective in my research, I will collect recorded conversation with the mentor teacher and use her feedback sheets to assess the effectiveness of my teaching. Additionally, I will make notes in lessons of things I view to be of importance for this study and write a reflective journal each day. I intend to review the data after each lesson to clarify the impact of my teaching on student engagement. To evaluate student engagement, I need to understand the attitudes and feelings of students towards school and learning. Student self-assessment perhaps is the most useful form of data that I can collect to measure student engagement, as it provides critical feedback about my teaching and student attitudes. Also, collecting student self-reflective data widens the scope for my analysis. I am planning to use the real framework that Mons and Woodward discussed in their paper on student engagement and student self-assessment. This framework measures student self-assessment according to the criteria of the MEE framework for engagement. I plan to organize questions and prompts to measure the attitudes of students concerning the 3 levels of engagement, which are high cognitive, high operative, and high affective. In doing so, I can accurately determine how students feel about the learning sequences and analyze markers of disengagement. I plan on using the smiley face prompt discussed in Mons and Woodward's paper as a feedback tool. This will be helpful for the students who cannot read well. The second type of reflective data that I plan on using is an open-ended questionnaire, which I will gather students at different stages to answer verbally for extensive responses. The questions I will ask students are: how do you feel about your peers to create this story? How do you solve problems in the group? How would you work on this story if you did this on your own? Explain how your thinking was different today from yesterday. What did your peers teach you today that you did not know before? Why do you think this is useful? Analyze the collected data to evaluate the impact of my teaching on achievement and student engagement. I planned these mini units of work because I realized that the students who were achieving low mark outcomes in 1H needed more encouragement to complete tasks and increase self-regulation to work independently. To challenge these students, I organized lessons to incorporate shared efforts of work amongst peers to get these students to think about more important areas of learning. For example, structuring their thoughts into written sentences and using their experiences outside of school to create stories. Analyzing their actions and conversation with their peers in my observational data will help me to determine if they are developing critical thinking skills and applying the skills across all learning activities. I am going to analyze the work samples, observational data, and student self-assessment tasks on the 2 principles of engagement in the MEE framework: substantive engagement and the insider classroom. I will measure the data based on my planning, how I plan for increasing engagement and students' attitudes towards the learning. In my previous analysis of this class, I noted a few areas that needed improvement. I am planning on introducing dialogic teaching as a strategy to override those issues in the learning space. To measure the effectiveness of this strategy on student engagement, I need the evidence to demonstrate markers of engagement. So does dialogic teaching methods equalize the discourse of power, give a greater sense of knowledge, ability, control, place, and voice as a means that belongs to the students? Also in my planning, addressing the 3 levels of substantive engagement: high cognitive, high operative, and high effective. If not, what areas do I need to review to remove markers of disengagement in the planning for learning? This presentation shows how I plan to use methodological research to evaluate the impact of my teaching on students' learning. Due to the current health crisis of COVID-19, I was unfortunately not able to implement this research into action. However, if I could hypothetically use the plan in a classroom, I would expect to gain critical insight into my practice of self-review in determining the marked impact that I have on students. The quote in John Hayes' book on visible learning sums up my teaching philosophy, how I plan to teach, and what I hope students take from the experience. The quote asks educators to nurture and challenge students so they can develop the intellectual and imaginative capacity that is far beyond their reach. My lesson plans hope to create the essence that this quote talks about by getting students to create an imaginative story on their own. It also is my duty of care by the teaching standards in Australia to challenge students' intellectual capacity for educational achievement as seen in Standards 3.1 and 3.2. I will have to know my students. I will have to know how my students learn before I get to this stage